Okay, so creating a new empire. Now, when we go through creating a new empire, you have to bear in mind the type of playstyle that you're going to actually try and enforce in the game. While a portion of it is obviously your appearance to the rest of the world, and it's not really going to matter so much, there are a couple of things in here that are quite important. So, things that aren't important, first of all, appearance. It doesn't matter how you look. Some of these are going to be restricted to the type of traits that you're going to pick up later on, but for the most part, it's if you, the exception is going to be machine. So essentially, you can be anything but machine depending on your playstyle. Most of the empire is going to be biological, so you can choose what you want your appearance to be. It doesn't matter. You can have a potato for a head. You can be a blog, just a fungus. It doesn't really matter. It is just purely based on your own opinion. Species name, again, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to randomly generate one here just so we can carry on. We can carry on regardless anyway. You can even decide to write your own biography for your character if you want. I am a fungus. Fear me. But obviously, if you're going to make your own name, bear in mind that you have to come up with a name, the plural for that name, and an adjective for the name as well. Name lists, again, it doesn't really matter. This is what decides your automatically generated prefix names for your ships. So at the moment, all my ships will have the prefix ISS. You can change it to, I don't know, fun, because he's a fun guy. And then choose your general naming convention. So I'm going for funguses, so I can automatically generate different types of fungus names if I want. There's a couple of variety of different names, but you can choose them. Or you can do hive names. It doesn't really matter. Even if you're playing a fungus, for example, you can name your ships humanoid names. There is no restrictions for them. Right, traits. Now, traits vary a little bit depending on the type of species that you pick. So the idea is that the restriction being that machines have a separate list, but I'll go through that in a separate video. Now, you have a different variety of trait points and trait picks. So at the moment I can pick 5 traits, but I have 2 points. Now you can see here, these ones are mainly positive ones. And if I scroll down, there are negative ones. So you can actually make your race bad at something, but in favor, you make them better at something. So I can pick up to 5 of these traits, but I have to bear in mind I only have 2 points. So for example, if I just want my people to be, I don't know, thrifty, they're great at energy generation. I can make them just great at energy generation, but that is my maximum amount of trait points now spent. I can technically pick another 4 if I want, so I can go down to some of the negative ones. So I can go down to, say, slow breeders, so they don't expand quite as fast. Their growth speed is lower. I can make them slow learners, so they're not great at experience generation. There we go. So I now have 2 more points and 2 more picks. So I can make them adaptive. So I can make them so that they're better at adapting to new environments. So even though their energy generation is great, they're great at inhabiting new planets, but they're not so great at experience and they're not so great at growing. You can balance it out as you please, but that bit is completely up to you. So, traits. Let's have a look at the traits window. I'll go in and explain these a little bit more. So, food generation. Agrarian, if you want to make yourself an agrarian society purely on food generation essentially is a way of controlling how fast your population will grow and expand. If you reach the capacity, there is a capacity limit in the game for food, which you can vary a little bit around, but for the most part, you're going to be trying to constantly be at the limit of food generation. What it will do is encourage faster growth throughout your empire, and that's it, really. It's just another way of growing your empire as fast as possible. If you're not generating enough food, obviously it will slow down the rate of growth quite significantly, so you want to try and encourage as much growth as possible. Thrifty, energy generation. Now, the game features a few different resources. Energy credits is one of the main ones. Minerals are another one, which I'll go into in a moment. Food is another one, but again, you reach the limit fairly quickly. It's not really one you pay too much attention to. Unity is another one. Influence is another one. And your general research ones. They are your main resources that you're going to go through in the game. So energy credits is considered a 2-point investment because it is considered a main resource. So if you're better at generating energy credits, you're going to have quite a dominant position in the galaxy. Industrious, as I say, minerals is the other one. So minerals is the second major resource in the game. If you want to be greater at generating minerals, again, industrious is the points to take. As I said, research is the next option. Engineering output, physics, and society outputs. Research in the game is split into those 3 categories. So you're constantly researching 3 different things in those categories. You can, depending on how your galaxy ends up getting, your empire gets laid out, you might be better at something in specific when it comes to engineering, physics, and society. Research in the game is the way that we saw that technology power in the first video. That is the way of developing the technology in your empire. You make yourselves better at doing things, whether that be combat, whether that be expanding, whether that be defense, whatever. So research is the way that you develop that. Next one is engineering output. So you can take a 2-point option and be good at 10% of everything, or you can take a specific thing and be 15% better at it. So engineering 15%, physics you can be better at 15%, or society you can be better at 15%. So your option is 2 points for all 3 at 10%, or you can take 3 points as 3 picks at 15%. Obviously, if you do this, you have to bear in mind that your number of picks is going to go down quite significantly. Extremely adaptive, so plus 20% habitability. Now, when you're picking your types of worlds, as you can see here, I've got a continental world type picked. Now, that means that if I go and inhabit another continental world in the galaxy, I'm going to have 100% habitability for that type of planet. Now, with 100% habitability, all my people there are going to be happy because that's the type of world that they all enjoy. Extremely adaptive means that if I go, for example, for another world type, for example, a desert world is another type of world type. Now, as standard, they might only be 50% habitable, but with this attribute, it will make it so it's 70%. It just makes them a little bit more happy and a little bit more content about being on some of those planets. Your planets have to reach a certain amount of habitability as well for your people to be able to actually inhabit it. I believe the number is over 40, I want to say 45 or 40%. If it's not above that number, then they can't inhabit the planet. So it can make the difference very early on in the game in terms of your expansion speed. If you're great at habitability very early on in the game, it means that you can expand to worlds a lot quicker in the game. As research goes on, you can research habitability to make your empire better at inhabiting planets. Adaptive is like extremely adaptive, but just not quite as strong. As such, extremely adaptive has the 4 points. Adaptive just has 2 points. Non-adaptive, you can actually give yourself -2 points. Now, not being obviously great at inhabiting planets early on in the game means that your expansion early on in the game is going to be quite small. So if you're going to perhaps take the option of taking over the galaxy and winning that way, adaptive or extremely adaptive is a good way to start. If you're perhaps looking at maybe forming a federation of groups of people, maybe taking non-adaptive could be a good idea because you're going to be relying on your allies a little bit more in terms of expansion. It also means that if they are taking areas of the universe, they're going to be taking it quite quickly compared to you. So you want to try and ally with them. So non-adaptive is an option there. Rapid breeders, growth speed, as I said before, it's literally just the speed of your population that grows on planets. The faster your population grows on planets, the more you can essentially get out of when you take over a planet. When you take over a planet, there is a series of what's known as tiles. I'll go into that in a later video. But with each one of those tiles, it has a particular type of resource, or it can generate a type of resource depending on the structure that's built on it. Growth speed -20, so again, just the same but in reverse. If you're again taking non-adaptive, slow breeders might mean that, you know, while you may take a planet, if you take slow breeders as well, the population growth on that planet is also going to be quite small. Talented, leader cap levels. So Leader level cap is the amount of leaders that you can have in your galaxy at one time. Again, I'll go into that in a separate video later on, but it's just the number of leaders that you can have. Earlier on in the game, it's not going to matter too much. Later on in the game, it might have a little bit of an impact, but I don't generally recommend it as a first-time player. You'll get to learn it a little bit better as the game goes on. Leader experience game. Now, every time you designate a leader as part of something, whether that be a part of a fleet, whether that be governing a planet. Again, we'll go into it later on in some of the other videos, but just to explain it, there's a experience system where you start off with, very on and early in the game, 1 point of experience, and then they have an experience bar. So the longer that they're doing things in the galaxy, whether that be looking after a planet, whether that be aboard a science vessel, whether that be researching, they gain experience over time, and the higher their experience, the better they are at doing something. So if they don't have, if they're a slow learner, which is the next one, the minus 25%, it just means that chances are they're going to actually live out their life before they get to that rank 5, the maximum kind of skill level. The maximum skill level obviously means that they're best at doing something. When it comes to researching in the galaxy, there are things known as anomalies, and anomalies will require a certain skill level to do some things. As well as things like if you're in combat, if you have a skill rank 5 individual, it means that they're going to be looking after a fleet a lot better. The fleet is going to be a lot more capable of doing things compared to going up against a fleet who has a level 1 commander, for example. Very strong. Now, very strong, and the next one I imagine is strong and then weak. So as you can see here, it affects the amount of minerals you generate, because your people are strong, so therefore they can mine better. And it also does increased army damage. Now, army damage, when you're playing more of the conquest role of trying to kill other people in the galaxy, you have to invade their planets. And to invade their planets, you use an army. Now, this attribute makes your army very, very strong, as you can see, which makes their damage a lot higher, which makes them more capable of taking over planets. You can see there's very strong, and weak. So if you're taking a weak, for example, you have to kind of bear in mind that your armies aren't going to be perhaps the best, so you're going to either have to deploy a greater number of armies, or you're going to have to change the type of playstyle that you're going to play. For example, if you're just trying to win the game by expanding yourself across the galaxy, perhaps taking weak might be an option if you want to, because you're not so worried about having to fight everyone off. You're literally just inhabiting planets, so therefore you're not fighting people. So you can get away with having the weak attribute to give yourself an extra point pick, for example, if you want. Nomadic even. Migration speed and resettlement cost. Now, you can, once people have settled on a planet and they've grown, you can actually move them between different places on planets, and that just gives you the option of moving between different tiles on planets a little bit faster and reduces the cost of moving them. We'll go into that one a little bit more later when we're having a look at planet tiles. Sedimentary is the reverse of nomadic. Exactly just the opposite of what I just said. It increases the cost of them moving between tiles and makes it a little bit slower. Communal makes everyone a little bit happier. Happiness across the galaxy, the happier someone is, generally, the more productive they are. So if you have a happy population on a planet, it means that they're going to do their jobs a lot better. Also, if there is a low level of happiness, chances are they might even riot on a planet. And if they start rioting on a planet, you need to deploy an army to that planet. If you're deploying an army to that planet, it's going to increase your resource cost, essentially, for running that planet, because you're going to have to garrison an army there to look after your people, to prevent them from uprising, essentially. Solitary reduces their happiness. Again, the complete opposite of what I just said. Charismatic. Now, given the option of allying with people across your galaxy, if you want to do that as a playstyle, you can take the charismatic attribute. Now, that makes everybody's opinion of you a little bit higher by default. So it means that they're a little bit more open to negotiations with you. They're a little bit more open when it comes to doing trade deals, when it comes to forming different types of pacts with other people. As you can see, it also means that the other species owner happiness is a little bit higher. That means that when other races, if you form what's known as a migration treaty between two empires, it means their people can come and work for you and your people can go and work for them. It also means that if their species comes across, it means that they're at least a little bit happier. Repugnant is the complete opposite again of what I was just explaining. Conformists, governing ethics attraction. Now, ethics is deviance is the opposite. Now, ethics in the game is a way of generating influence. It's another one of those major resources that I said at the start. Now, ethics is a way of thinking. So when we go into it a little bit later in terms of the different types of government and ethics that we're using, the ethics attraction basically means that if your main way of thinking is a peaceful way of thinking, that the people that you're going to attract are going to be peaceful. If your ethics attraction is a negative number, like this, at 15%, while you may have a peaceful mindset for your empire, it means that the people that you're attracting, for example, might be more of a militant background. They may want to, for example, fight. The idea being is that you want to try and get everyone on the same line of thinking where it's all possible, as it will increase their happiness. It will increase the influence generation as well. So again, that's another point. Venerable and enduring and fleeting are all age-related ones. Now, as I said to you before, age is kind of in line with the experience gain. If you make them live longer, chances are that they'll be able to run things for longer. It also means that they'll be able to gain experience for longer amounts of time. Obviously, everything on this option is biological, so it does have a limited lifespan. As time goes on, you can research for lifespans, so you can make people live longer. As I say, chances are if they live longer, they're going to become better at doing something. Also, every time that you have to elect someone to a position, you end up using influence as a cost to employ them. So it's if they're living longer, chances are that you're going to have to spend less influence. It also means, as I say, they're going to gain that experience. Venerable is the biggest one at plus 80. Enduring is the smaller one at plus 20. And fleeting is the complete opposite. It actually makes them live less time. Decadent is... So you have the option of having slaves in the game. And... happiness without owned population. The species requires slaves or robotic servants to feel content. Now you can, as it says there, you can enslave people across the galaxy depending on the type of playstyle that you have. You can be a slaver or you can be against it, for example. Decadent is literally an attribute that says if they haven't got slaves, they're going to be less happy. They're going to want slaves as part of their empire. So you have to bear that in mind if that's the type of playstyle that you want, that you're going to have to pick that as an option. If you're actually going to have slaves, it may be worth picking it. If you're not, I mean, it's completely up to yourselves. It's just an idea that if you're going to have slaves, you're going to perhaps want to consider having the decadent option to give you that extra points available to you. Because you're going to have slaves anyway, it means that everybody's going to be happy. If you're not going to have slaves, then obviously if you pick decadent, your happiness is always going to be a negative 10 value. So you just need to bear that in mind. Resilient, garrison strength and fortification bonus. Now, when I said to you earlier about armies when they attack planets, you have garrisons on planets. Now, resilient means that if you have a garrisoned army on a planet, that the garrison is going to take longer to kill by orbital bombardment. We'll come into that later on as well. But it also means that the people on your planet are going to get a bonus to defending that planet. So it just means that your race is essentially harder to kill. Or resilient, as the name may actually show. Wasteful and conservationist. Okay, so consumer goods cost is an ongoing cost in your empire. So consumer goods are, for every one population you have, for example, they may have a consumer good cost of, say, 3. Now, that consumer goods cost comes straight out of your energy or minerals. Now, early on in the game, you're not really going to notice the impact that it makes, but when your empire gets very large, the consumer goods cost also expands with it. So you will notice it a lot more towards the end of the game. So you have a species of 500 people, you're going to have quite an impact on the consumer goods cost, or the consumer goods usage, I should say, at that point in the game. So it's a very it's something you need to bear in mind more for later on in the game. So if you're planning on expanding your empire by inhabiting mass planets, having a lower consumer goods cost might be something you would consider, because it means that ideally you're going to have more minerals available to you later on in the game. And that is the traits window. Right, so the ruler screen, it doesn't really matter in terms of the name that you decide that you want to use. So for example, I can call this guy Mushroom, and I can make him, you just decide a title for him. So for example, I'm going to call him Lord. So this guy is Lord Mushroom. You can choose the types of color that you want to use. So I can have a green, bluish mushroom if I want. And you can change the room background. So if you want him to look like he is part of the environment, so he's got like vines growing in there. He's got chains, so that could be one for like a slaver mushroom king, I guess. It's all up to your own imagination, really. You can have a nice futuristic one with spears, so he could be an aggressive warlike mushroom race. You know, you could have a digital one, so you've got a future mushroom idea, maybe. This guy has no options to change phenotypes, hairstyles, or clothes. If I just go back and make this guy, for example, a human, as you can see here, you can choose the sex, so you can go male or female. You can change the ruler title again for a female versus a male, but you can change the phenotype, so you can change, you know, essentially skin color is probably an easy way of describing it. You can also mix up people's hairstyles. You know, you can give them a Jonathan Frakes beard with a bit of a dodgy haircut. You can also change the clothes, so if you want them to look like, you know, this guy is Admiral someone. Oh, there we go. I like that beard. There you go. Nice Admiral for you. Instead of Lord, we are now Admiral Akbar. No, he doesn't look like an Akbar, but, you know, it's a trap. Yeah. And that's the ruler screen.